And our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. I don't know about you, but the morning's just kind of zipping right along here. By this rate, we'll be out by 3 o'clock, all right? I'd like to start this morning by giving a shout out to those who were gracious enough to step up and share a message with us in the congregation while I was away. Diane kicked things off by talking about how the world changes when we listen to what God says to us and we actually do some of the things that He prods us to do. And then Pam and Jared and Jeff all shared messages straight from their hearts. I just can't thank you guys enough. Pam's in here, Diane's here. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. I think a round of applause is appropriate. And we look forward to more of those to come, right? So I think Jared, in his first message, talked about, I think it was titled BFF, best friends forever. And he got me thinking about that word friend and friendships. So I looked up a couple of quotes. These are views from the world, friendship views from the world. One of them says, a friend is someone who is always there, even when they want to be someplace else. That's a good friend. A friend, number two, a friend is someone who gives you total freedom to be yourself. I can get around that. Third one says a true friend is someone who thinks you're a good egg, even when they know you're slightly cracked. All right, that one's for Terry out there, by the way. And now, I want to start talking about friends and friendship. I want to talk about that this morning. I want to talk about what it means to be a friend. We read 3 different verses, 3 different ways that God uses the word friend and how He calls some of His followers friends, or calls His followers friends. Now, I want to start by giving you a little perspective, a different perspective than you might have about friendships, about people. If you've been around here for a while, you know that I'm retired Air Force. I retired early from the Air Force. I got a nice little package. But anyway, aim high, right? So while we were in the Air Force, now we didn't move around probably as much as some of our friends did, but we moved around our fair share. And it forced us and our kids to look at friendships differently than most people, or people who spend maybe their entire either childhood or lives in the same town, the same house, the same school, things like that. Now, I started my career in Virginia, and when we moved, the first move we did, we went to Japan. My oldest daughter was 2.5, and my youngest daughter was 8 months. So we moved to Japan. We spent 6 years there. And obviously during that time, we created some wonderful, strong friendships and relationships with the people there. But then around year 5, all of those people started to move away, one by one. And we went to these parties, and we had great going away parties for these people. One by one, people moved away. And by the time it was for us to leave to PCS, as they call it, our friends were pretty much gone, and there really wasn't a going away party. So we talked about that with our kids, saying, well, we got to celebrate with everybody who was on their way out. So then we went to Alaska. Now, we spent 3 years there, which doesn't sound like much, but that's a long time to spend in one place. And when you're in the military, you learn how to gain relationships and friendships rather quickly. You just bond together just more quickly than you do at different places, kind of because you're all in the same boat together. So, all right, so we're in Alaska for 3 years. Then when it was time for us to leave Alaska, the opposite happened as what happened in Japan. We were the first to leave. We had, again, strong relationships in the chapel, and we had a strong relationship with the people in our neighborhood. We always had cookouts and things like that. We were the first people to leave. Now, it hit us a little bit differently. It was a little harder to leave because everybody was still there. My kids really didn't want to leave. But I said, in 6 months, none of these people are going to be in these same houses. The chapel people are all going to be gone. It's going to look completely different. So we started talking about that. We sat around the kitchen table, and had a big bowl of popcorn, right, laying in them, because that's how we handle family discussions and things. We get around a bowl of popcorn, and we talk about what was happening, and most importantly, what we could learn from what we were experiencing. Now, I started by explaining that the people that we meet at different bases, and this isn't a hack on anybody or cut on anybody, this is just reality. The people that we meet at different bases, they're going to come and go. There's just no getting around that. That's just the way life was. And we fully understood and fully knew that we were saying goodbye to some of these people for the last time, and we wouldn't have contact with them again, we wouldn't see them again. But then I told them this, that the people that are around your kitchen table that were eating my popcorn are going to be there always for each other. Now, you could argue that point that we're not always there when we need each other. But if we left it just at family, just at that bond, we would be missing and falling short of what we would call the rest of the story. Because if we were completely honest, let me pull myself together here, we would understand that there are times when people around that kitchen table just can't be there immediately, right? And then those clever little sayings that we had at the beginning of the message here are just kind of just that. They're just words. They don't really have any meaning or any substance or any comfort. But that's where God steps in. That's where God takes over. And he has these little nuggets of truth throughout his word for us to hang our hat on and for us to wrap our arms around as he wraps his arms around us. For example, Proverbs 18:24 tells us that it says basically, companions come and go, but there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Actually, it says friends come and go, but I like that word companions. Come and go, but there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Now, when we look at Proverbs 18:24, if you're taking notes, Proverbs 18:24, it's actually a sticky little verse to translate. Proverbs are a little sticky to translate because we don't have a lot of context with them. They're kind of little nuggets that stand out by themselves. And as we say, when we're reading the Bible, when we're translating words, context is king. What's the context of that word? Well, it's difficult to take something out of context and just put it someplace and interpret it. But we do know this. We do know that the Proverbs 18:24 can be broken down into two parts. The first part says that friends will let you down. There's just no getting around that. There's going to be times sometimes on purpose, sometimes by choice, sometimes by happenstance, sometimes that's just the way it goes. People are going to let you down. But then it says, there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Now, we talked about those people around your kitchen table eating your popcorn, right? That's the brother, that's the relation, right? But there's a friend who will stick closer than a brother. And sometimes when we read verses like that, we think, well, I got to go out and find that friend that's going to stick to me closer than a brother's going to stick to me. That's not what Solomon is saying here. Now, Solomon wrote the greater share of the Proverbs, and he certainly wrote Proverbs 18. So let's get to the point here in how he's going to get to us. Because like I said, the first part says, friends are going to let you down. If you don't believe me, ask somebody to pick you up at the airport at 11:30 at night, or ask somebody to help you move on a Sunday afternoon while the Packer game is going on, right? People are going to let you down, and they're not always going to come through for you when you need them to. And God understands that. But he says there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. All right, so now, but you get the idea. So, like I said, Solomon wrote these Proverbs, and of course, when he was writing them, he wrote them in Hebrew. So, all right, it's like I said, it's difficult to translate this Hebrew to English straight from Hebrew. But listen to this now. The first part of the verse says, "A friend will let you down," and then the second part says, "There's a friend that sticks closer to a brother." Now, we use the same word there. We use the same word, friend and friend, but that's not what the Hebrew says. The Hebrew first says a companion, an acquaintance, will let you down. But then it says there's a friend. The second half of it says there's a friend that will stick closer than a brother, and it's a completely different Hebrew word. The Hebrew word is ahav. Everybody say ahav. And it rhymes with cave. It's not ahav, it's one word, ahav. Say it again, ahav. And I want you to carry that word out with you today. And like I told you, the break's over. You're going to start studying Hebrew again, so get your pencils out. This word has a deeper meaning than that. It's really broken down into two parts. Ahav means what God's love is for us. Ahav also means our love for God. So when we say there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother, we're not talking about your best friend or your BFF from high school or whatever. We're talking about Christ. We're talking about God. We're talking about the Trinity that we just sang about here a few minutes ago. We're talking about one that's never going to leave you, never going to forsake you, right? Didn't we just read that in Isaiah, right? I am your God. I will strengthen you. I'll hold you up with my righteous right hand. And now you might be thinking, why don't they just say that then? Why don't they just give us that interpretation so we can understand it a little bit better? But like I said, it's difficult to translate these words sometimes. So we dig in just a little bit deeper. And when we start looking at that word ahav, we start seeing it popping up all over in the Bible. And we sometimes think, well, what's it doing there? What's it popping up for? Exodus 33:11 says that God spoke to Moses as one speaks to a friend, ahav. God spoke to Moses as one speaks to a friend, right? That, and not just an acquaintance, a have, right? With that love of God and that love for God. But the verses that we need to pay attention to a little bit more, using a have or using that word friend, pay close attention to the ones where God calls us his friends. And just exactly what that means. Isaiah 41:8 that Lyle read just here a little bit ago. It says, as for you, Israel, my servant Jacob, that's the same thing. Jacob's name was changed to Israel. That's where we get the Israel nation from, is from Jacob. As for you, my servant Jacob, my chosen one, descended from Abraham, my have, my friend. He calls Abraham his friend. God calls Abraham his friend, his ahave, no less than 3 times in the Bible. And we know that God will talk on a level to us as one talks to a friend. So here's the thing. You know, I'm just going to encourage you strongly to take this bulletin home with you today. You know, there's a little basket out there that says put your bulletin in. Don't put your bulletin in that basket. Bring it home with you. These verses are really short and they're succinct. They're very much to the point. I'd like you to spend some time looking at them as you get home, when you get home this afternoon. Because here's the deal. Sometimes we read these verses, my descendant from Abraham, my friend. Sometimes we read these verses that we talk about Sunday morning, and we think they're written for somebody else. We think they're talking about somebody else. Yeah, I get it. That Abraham dude, whoever that was, Father Abraham, isn't there a song, something, right? I get it. He's God's friend. Moses, that dude, yeah, he had the staff and everything, right? I get that. He spoke to God as like a friend. But God says, I'm doing this for you too. God says that friend status is a reality for everyone who asks. That friend status is a reality for everyone who asks. To put it in terms you might be able to understand a little better, if you send God a friend request, he's going to answer it immediately. And you know what? Here's the deal. Spoiler alert. God has a friend request out to you right now. And as opposed to your other Facebook habits of just stalking people, he expects more out of you. He expects more out of that friendship, that ahave relationship. He expects your love. He expects your trust. God expects you to do some things. Like Jesus said, you are my friends if you do what I command. So he expects one thing out of you. He expects obedience. Right? Before I joined the Air Force, I was in the Army for 5 years. Pat, shout out to the Army who, right? Oh, I got some Army up top too. Hey, I didn't want to throw it at you. So I had to go to these, I call them Army training, sir, right? I had to go to all these little things, and I kind of enjoyed them a little bit. One of the things I enjoyed doing, this is going to blow your mind. One of the things I enjoyed doing was being on guard duty, right? And we'd be out in the middle of nowhere. It's not like I was guarding a gate or guarding something. I'm guarding basically a bush and a path, right? It'd be pitch black out, and I'd be sitting there waiting, and all these patrols would have to be coming out. And you'd have to challenge them. And so you challenge them. So I'd wait till they were just about on top of me, and then I would jump out at them, like that, right? And say, halt, who goes there? And then one time I did it, and there was my drill sergeant, and he screamed like my sister used to scream. I used to stand at the top of the stairs and wait for her to come up the top of the stairs like an hour sometimes. She'd come up at the top of the stairs, and I go, oh! And then sometimes I have to grab her so she didn't go back down the stairs. Well, my drill sergeant didn't think it was any funnier than she did. But, right? Okay, but the reason I'm telling you that story is to get to the friend or foe, right? Halt, who goes there, friend or foe? It's a simple thing, yes or no. Because we didn't know everybody that was in our own squadron, let alone our whole platoon, right? So we'd have to have that challenge and password. Are you a friend or are you a foe? Are you an enemy? Simple definition of an enemy is this: listen to this now, one who dislikes or hates another and seeks to harm, contradict, and fight the one he is set against. One who dislikes or hates another seeks to harm, contradict, and fight the one he is set against. So then an enemy or a foe of God is one who opposes the presence and the purpose of God in this world. Namely, old Lucifer there and his band of misfits. We'll dig in more into that in the next upcoming weeks. So there's your teaser right there. But Jesus is very clear on what makes one a friend of God. And it's obedience. How do we get that level of ahav? Obedience to his commandments. And now you should be asking almost out loud with words, what is he commanding me to do? I want to be Jesus' friend. I want to be a friend of God. I want God to talk about me the way he talks about Abraham. Abraham, my friend. I'm talking about Gary, my friend. Reuben, my friend. Terry, my friend. I want that conversation to happen. I want those words to come out. So what does he command us to do? Because sometimes we hear this from other people, and sometimes we may feel it ourselves. Christianity is just a bunch of rules, just a bunch of commands that we got to follow, and we got to stay on the straight and narrow line. Otherwise, God's going to beat us up, and he's not going to be our friend, right? That's not how it works. It's completely the opposite of how it works. Because God says, I've got some commands for you. I've got some ideas for you. He calls them commands because they're not suggestions. They're things that we need to do. He didn't say, I suggest you do these things. No, he says, you go and do these things. If you're my people, I want these things for you, and I want you to do these things. We saw it a second ago. Love your neighbor as yourself. All right. Think of somebody more highly than yourself. All right, I can get along with that one. But then Jesus says some very basic building blocks of our relationship with him. He says, believe in God and also believe in me. John 14. Believe in God. Also believe. That's a command. Doesn't sound like some kind of rule that's going to be hard to get our minds wrapped around. It makes sense. Because when we believe in him, we start to trust him, right? And that's the other thing he says. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Trust in the Lord. Believe. Trust. And Jesus also said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and all your mind. That sounds like a pretty good idea. That sounds like a pretty good command. And Jesus says, you're ahav, you're my friend when you do these things. And then he says this. He says, take my yoke upon you. For my yoke is easy. My burden is light. And when we read something like that, we might think that's just a suggestion. That's maybe for somebody else, but Jesus said, no, that's a command. That's where I want you. I want you yoked together with me, not so that you can pull the load, so that I, Jesus says, can pull it for you. Your burden is light. Why? Because I'm doing it for you. If you'll take my yoke upon you. If you'll accept that friend request that I've sent out to you. If you'll believe in God, believe also in me. If you'll trust in the Lord with all your heart. If you'll love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. Then take my yoke upon you and it's going to be easier. I'm not going to say life is going to be perfect, but you get the idea, right? Like I said, people sometimes tell you Christianity is just a bunch of rules that we got to follow and something. No, for your own good. Right? We got rules for our kids too, right? That we keep them in safe for their own good. Look both ways before you cross the street. That's not a suggestion, that's a command, right? Keeps us safe, keeps us happy. But here's the deal with God's commands. They're meant to give you life to the fullest. He's not just some kind of rule keeper and keeping score like that. No, he says, I want you to live the best possible life. And that best possible life is with me. Do what I'm telling you to do. Pick up what I'm putting down. Live life to the fullest. And so here's the deal. You get to decide. Same way as when you get that friend request, you get to decide what to do with it. Are you going to be a friend of God or are you going to be an enemy of God? Because one day this is going to happen to all of us. We're going to be walking along, minding our own business, and then bam, one day, Jesus is going to jump out from behind a bush and say to you, who goes there, friend or foe? Amen? Let's stand. And let's confess together what we believe in the words of the apostle.